Her daughter-in-law rented out her house, without permission. Miriam came home to strangers in her kitchen, brushing their teeth with her water. So she listed the guest house her kids lived in to a biker club with loud grills and louder music. By nightfall, Lena's Instagram-perfect empire was flooded, with leather jackets and lawn chairs. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She just gave her house back to people who knew how to ask. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The first thing Miriam noticed was the shoes. Two unfamiliar pairs by the front door, one a set of battered white sneakers, the other brown hiking boots that definitely weren't hers. The scent hit next, some kind of citrus cleaner mixed with cologne. Her stomach pinched. She stepped over the threshold slowly, suitcase still in hand. A dog-eared mystery novel peeked from the side pocket, untouched since she'd left for her weekend in Sedona. But her house, very much touched. A man's voice floated in from the kitchen. "Babe, they've got the good coffee filters here." Miriam dropped her keys onto the hallway table a little too hard. Then silence. Footsteps. A young man emerged, 20-something, tall, polite smile trying to land on a rapidly sinking ship. "Oh, hi. You must be the host, Cam," he said, offering a hand. Miriam didn't take it. "Host?" "Yeah, it was booked through Airbnb." Lena was super responsive. He looked around as if expecting her to beam with pride over the throw pillows or the natural light. "Love what you've done with the place." Her hands stayed at her sides. "Lena?" "Yeah, Lena and Kyle," he said. The listing said Modern Retreat by Lena and Kyle. It's in both their names. Miriam's blood slowed. A cold, sharp stillness spread from her spine outward. "This is my home," she said, almost to herself. Cam's expression flickered. "Wait, is this not—" "I didn't authorize a rental, I didn't post a listing, and I sure as hell didn't hand out a key code I never set." She walked past him, straight to the kitchen, where a travel mug sat on the counter. Hers, but filled with someone else's coffee. Cam blinked, suddenly unsure. "They said their mom was out of town." "She is. And now she's back." Her voice was quiet, firm, final. He apologized, genuinely. Gathered his things quickly. "I'll leave right now. I don't want trouble." Miriam nodded once. "You're not the problem." As he packed, she walked out the back door, down the gravel path toward the guest house. Her knees ached from the drive, but she powered through the crunch of stones until she stood at the door where her son and daughter-in-law had moved temporarily 2 years ago. She knocked. No answer. Again. She waited. Still nothing. Curtains drawn. Porch light off. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kyle. "Sorry. Figured you wouldn't mind. It's only for a week. Super easy money. We'll deep clean after. No harm, no foul." The smiley face hit harder than any insult, a tidy little emoji to mop up entitlement. Miriam stared at the screen, unblinking, until it dimmed and blacked out. She didn't bother knocking again. Instead, she walked slowly back to her car, opened the trunk, and curled up in the back seat with a blanket that still smelled like lemon balm. She kept the windows cracked and the doors locked. The stars above Flagstaff were brilliant and cold. Somewhere in the main house, the air conditioning kicked on, a hum she could hear even from here. Her air, her power bill, her name on the mortgage, and still, she slept in her car. Not for lack of space, but out of sheer disbelief. Rage hadn't arrived yet, only the terrible, hollow quiet that came before it. Her phone buzzed again around midnight. This time, it was Reed. "Hey," he said, voice low and blunt. "Got your message." Miriam closed her eyes. "They rented my house, Reed. They went behind my back and listed it." "They did what?" She could hear papers rustling on his end. Always working, always half buried in someone's lawsuit. "I walked in on a stranger brushing his teeth in my bathroom," she whispered. "They gave him a key code, Reed, one I never even made." Silence for a beat. "You still on the deed?" he asked. Miriam opened her glove box and pulled out the crumpled file folder she kept there. A paranoid habit no one ever took seriously until now. The deed sat inside, yellowing but real. "I am." Good, Reed said. Then this isn't over. Miriam looked back toward the house. A light turned on in the upstairs bedroom. Her bedroom. Her voice dropped into a cold, razor-flat tone. Not by a long shot. The glow of Miriam's dashboard light made her skin look papery and pale. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the Airbnb app. It wasn't rage yet, more like violation, crawling under her skin like cold water down the back of her shirt. She typed in Modern Retreat, T. Flagstaff, and scrolled until she found it. Modern Retreat by Lena and Kyle, hosted 4.97 stars. Superhost. There it was, a photo of her living room, the antique quilt she'd hand-stitched in '89 neatly folded over the arm of the sofa. The same sofa she'd watched reruns of Murder, she wrote on every Thursday night, now described as mid-century charm meets desert chic. Her eyes locked on the bio. A generational gift we upgraded into a healing escape, built with love, redesigned for modern comfort. Gift? Miriam let out a slow, steadying breath. She hadn't gifted anything. They'd begged to live in the back house when Kyle lost his job, promised it was temporary, promised they'd respect her boundaries. She tapped into the listings gallery. There was her kitchen, the mixing bowl set from her mother labeled vintage cookware, her bookshelves in the background of some staged tea setup. Even the hallway, freshly painted not by Lena but by her late husband 10 years ago, described as earth-toned tranquility. She started screenshotting. Every photo, every caption, every guest review. One review made her lips curl. Loved the personalized touches. Feels like stepping into someone's story. It was someone's story. Heron. She pulled up her email and forwarded the screenshots to herself, then attached them in a message to Reed with the subject line, Fraudulent Listing, Evidence. Her fingers hovered over the Airbnb support tab. Her gut told her they wouldn't move fast, but the paper trail mattered. She filed a report, flagged the listing, and began documenting every step in a notepad she kept in her glove box. At 3:17 a.m., too wired to sleep, she dialed her insurance company's emergency line. I need to lock down my homeowner's policy, she told the groggy agent. Effective immediately. I believe my property is being used commercially without my consent. The agent asked if she had proof. Oh, Miriam said with a tired laugh. You have no idea how much. By dawn, she was sitting on a bench at Buffalo Park, sipping a gas station coffee and watching mist rise off the trees. Birds chirped in the distance, but inside her head it was all static. She wasn't done, not even close. By 9 a.m., Reed had responded. Got the files. Cease and desist letter is underway. Sit tight, you're not crazy. Miriam smiled, a tight, brief curve of the mouth. That was the thing. For years they'd made her feel dramatic when she asserted herself, overreacting, controlling, emotional, and now she was the only one in control. Her phone buzzed again, an Instagram notification. She didn't follow Lena, but the algorithm had learned to serve her content anyway. Probably from the tagged location. A new reel, another successful hosting week, family roots, luxe vibes. Can't wait to welcome our next guests, Jock Airbnb superhost Dr. Flagstaff, Getaway Dr. Legacy Retreat. The video was set to an acoustic cover of This Must Be the Place. It opened with a slow-motion shot of Kyle lighting candles in her living room, followed by Lena spinning in the kitchen like she'd built the damn house herself. Miriam watched the whole thing. Twice. Then she pressed record. The camera faced her. No makeup, no filters, just Miriam in her windbreaker, sitting in front of the Flagstaff tree line. This is Miriam Harlow, she said, voice clear, calm, and sharp as a tack. The house in that reel, that's mine. I didn't approve a rental, I didn't give anyone permission, and I'm not finished. She stopped the video before she said too much. Didn't post it, not yet. Instead, she attached it to a new draft in her email titled, Just in Case. She leaned back on the bench, breathing in pine and vengeance. By Tuesday morning, Miriam didn't need to go looking for the fire. It came to her. It started as a low buzz in her notifications. Her Gmail pinged. Then again, a rhythm building faster than her caffeine could keep up with. Subject, Hey, is this your house? Subject, Thought you'd want to see this? Subject, Your living room's viral. The video was everywhere by noon. It was Cam, same guy from the kitchen, now sitting in his car in what looked like a gas station parking lot, holding a lukewarm coffee and speaking into his phone. So I booked a cozy Airbnb in Flagstaff, Arizona. Hosts were great. Lena and Kyle, very polished. I show up, all is fine. Until the real homeowner walks in. Yeah. Turns out the woman they claimed was out of town, owns the house, and didn't know it was being rented out. I brushed my teeth in a stranger's bathroom, y'all. The comments are open. It hit TikTok's algorithm like a blood scent in water. Within hours, thousands of comments stacked like bricks. Wait, they rented out someone else's house? That woman's a queen. I hope she burns them to the ground, legally. Kyle and Lena found their IG fake hospitality energy. She's the owner? They stole her house for clout? Miriam watched it all unfold with her feet up on the porch rail, sipping weak coffee. Like it was champagne. Her favorite comment, hands down. They tried to steal comfort. She gave them consequence. Airbnb reached out by mid-afternoon. A customer service rep called her personally. Tight tone, careful language. We've suspended the listing pending investigation, they said. We'll need documentation to determine hosting rights. Oh, Miriam replied. I have folders. She faxed in the deed, her insurance claim, the time-stamped screenshots. Reed backed it with the cease and desist letter, and just like that, the house was delisted. It was a small victory, a line in the sand. But what followed was the part that truly amused her. Lena posted a new reel that evening. No music, just a panning shot of the guesthouse garden with a caption that read, "Sometimes recentering means letting go of what no longer aligns, taking a break from hosting to recalibrate and elevate. Thanks for the love." Miriam tilted her phone, unimpressed. The hashtags were still going. Soccer desserts Arenity. Sup modern hosts. Legacy retreat. She clicked into the comments. Dozens of followers were already skeptical, some tagging Cam's video. One comment simply read, "You didn't recalibrate. You got caught." Miriam allowed herself one act of pettiness. She typed with purpose. "Glad to know my couch photographs well." Posted. No emojis, no signature. Just a clean hit. 10 minutes later, the door to the back house slammed open. Kyle marched across the gravel path like a storm front, his steps heavy, jaw clenched. He didn't knock, just banged twice, hard, knuckles like hammers on her front door. Miriam didn't rush. She folded her reading glasses, set down her crossword, and opened the door slowly. His voice shot out before she even stepped aside. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." She blinked at him. "You're going online now? You're posting crap under her reels?" he snapped. "You've got people commenting that we stole from you." "Didn't you?" she said evenly. Kyle's face twisted, color rising. "It's not that simple." "Oh, I think it is." She stepped outside, letting the screen door ease shut behind her. "You rented out my house behind my back, lied to guests, put my name, my property, and my insurance at risk, and then went online to monetize it under the guise of family roots." He scoffed. "So what? You're getting your revenge now? One comment at a time?" She looked at him. Really looked. His defensiveness wasn't just fear, it was panic. Because Lena's polished world was cracking, and Kyle didn't know how to hold it together without her filtered reality propping them up. She adjusted the sleeves of her cardigan, calm and precise. "Oh, this," she said. "This is just the start." Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. By Thursday morning, the back house sat silent, like a stage between acts. Kyle and Lena had vanished for some kind of damage control retreat, or maybe just to wait out the internet storm. Either way, the gravel driveway was empty, their Prius gone, and the lights inside hadn't flickered on in over 12 hours. Miriam waited until the dew had lifted from the grass, then stepped outside with purpose. She didn't knock. The back house key had never changed. Miriam had insisted on keeping a copy when they first moved in, just in case. Kyle had rolled his eyes back then. Lena called it controlling. Now it was just useful. The lock turned with a familiar click, and she pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled like eucalyptus and vinegar spray. A diffuser puffed soft lavender from a corner table. The place was staged, neatly, intentionally, falsely. Throw blankets folded just so. Fake succulents on windowsills, a tray of color-coded brochures labeled Flagstaff Must-Dos. It wasn't a home, it was a set. She walked through slowly, taking it all in. The way the light fell through the skylight her husband had installed with his own hands, now filtered onto an open guest welcome binder filled with rules she hadn't written, house Wi-Fi, local delivery suggestions, even a playlist QR code titled Rustic Reset Vibes. Miriam pulled out her phone and started snapping photos, wide angles, details, the ridiculous branded slippers in the closet with retreat mode printed across the toes. She didn't smile once. By the time she got back to her own kitchen, she already had the Airbnb listing half-drafted. Title: Unique Rustic Retreat. Perfect for large groups or events. Bio: Private guest house just outside Flagstaff Center. Gorgeous light, ample space, and a history of welcoming travelers. Loud groups welcome. Great for gatherings, reunions, and club events. The last line was important. She opened her email, searched her archives, and found it fast. Subject line: Bikefest lodging inquiry. Still need space? To Darla Renner. From Miriam Harlow. Hi Darla, still looking for space during Bikefest weekend? Something tells me I've got the perfect spot. Detached unit, great privacy, fully equipped. Neighbors may not be thrilled, but I sure as hell won't complain. Let me know. M. She hit send before she could second guess it. The reply came 3 minutes later. Wait, you're serious? Hell yes. We'll treat it right. Rattlers don't trash what we respect. I'll bring the folding chairs. And a grill. Sound good? Miriam stared at the message, let a small breath out through her nose, and typed back, "One rule, no fires indoors." Outside, the wind rustled through the pine trees, soft and irregular. She opened her junk drawer, pulled out the new security camera she'd bought last month but never installed, and walked back to the edge of the shared property line. The perfect angle was just under the eave of the garage, pointed directly at the back house door. She affixed the mount, clipped in the camera, and synced it to her phone. There. Not for spying. Just observation. Insurance, she told herself. Accountability. By late afternoon, she got a ping on Instagram. Lena again. A new reel. We're taking a quick break from hosting while we refresh our brand and recenter our mission. A looping boomerang of a sunrise behind their house. Inspirational music. A voiceover about navigating the ebbs and flows of digital hospitality. Miriam muted it and walked to the pantry. She pulled down her tin of Earl Grey, set the kettle on the stove, and glanced at the clock. If Darla's crew was coming, they'd need space to park. Plenty of gravel, plenty of space, plenty of noise. She sipped her tea slowly, watching steam curl from the mug. Saturday morning broke loud. The first to arrive was a matte black van with red pinstriping and an exhaust pipe that let out a snort like an angry bull. Then came the bikes. 3, then 5, then 12, pulling in like a rumble of thunder spread out across her gravel drive. They parked in a loose semicircle, engines cooling with metallic ticks. Leather jackets opened, bandanas came off, boots hit dirt. Laughter spilled out like beer foam. Miriam stood on the front porch in pressed jeans and a button-up chambray shirt, hair tucked neatly behind her ears, holding a thermos in one hand and a rolled-up property map in the other. "Morning," she called out, voice crisp and neighborly. Darla dismounted first. Aviator glasses, dark braid, thick boots crunching pine needles. "This the lady herself," she said, pointing toward Miriam. "Treat her like royalty." Murmured greetings rose from the group. Nods, grins, the kind of deference earned rather than demanded. A wiry man named Shooter hauled out a folding table, another laid out a tarp for gear. Coolers opened, speakers connected to a battery pack, someone lit incense. It had the energy of a church picnic, if the church believed in Harleys and Hank Williams. Miriam walked the map over to Darla. "Here's where you can park, here's where not to. Quiet hours technically start at 10, but I won't be enforcing them." Darla grinned, eyes twinkling. "We'll keep it neighbor-friendly loud." Miriam took a long sip from her thermos. "I'm counting on it." They were just unloading the grill when it happened. The Prius rolled in, quieter than the bikes, but still intrusive, like a phone ringing in a funeral parlor. It turned the corner onto the property, came to a dead stop halfway up the driveway. Inside, Kyle and Lena, matching linen outfits, sunglasses, shock frozen across both faces. The car door opened. Slowly, Lena stepped out first, her hand lifting to her chest like she'd found a gun instead of a grill. Kyle followed, jaw slack. A rattler named Mick walked by carrying a case of Modelo. "Hey there, party people," he said with a wink. Darla turned toward them and smiled, tossing a hand up in a wide wave. "You must be the other guests." Lena recoiled like she'd been slapped. "What is going on?" Her voice cracked at the end, part outrage, part fear. She scanned the scene like it was a hallucination. The tattoos, the denim, the soft country music floating over from someone's Bluetooth speaker. The flagstone path she once described on her influencer reel as our signature peace walk was now being used as a bike ramp by two teens doing wheelies. Kyle didn't move. Miriam walked down the porch steps slowly, her footsteps deliberate, soft gravel under calm feet. She stopped 3 paces from them, folded her arms, and tilted her head. "A little hospitality exchange," she said coolly. "I figured you'd understand." Lena's mouth opened and closed. Kyle's hands twitched at his sides. Behind them, the Prius engine was still idling, uncertain, like it knew it had no place here anymore. You can't," Lena stammered, blinking hard. Miriam just raised an eyebrow. "No one changed the lock, Lena. Isn't that how this works?" Kyle found his voice. "You let bikers stay in our place?" Miriam smiled faintly, like she was being offered a free dessert she didn't need. "Not yours," she said. "But yes, and they actually asked first." Darla let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's colder than a busted radiator." A round of low chuckles followed, the kind of laughter that knew exactly what had happened and exactly why it mattered. Lena turned bright red. Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find even a single foothold. They had used her name, her home, her history as backdrop for their curated success, and now that success was crumbling under the weight of something real: community, noise, unfiltered living. The sound of a can cracking open somewhere behind them echoed like punctuation. Major twist number 1. The same digital tool they used to erase her, Airbnb, hosting, content, Miriam had now weaponized, not with noise but with mirroring. She turned their curated empire into a free-for-all weekend with real people, real voices, and real legal footing. And the world was watching again. Sunday afternoon brought a wind that carried smoke and guitar strings. The grill was going. Darla was manning it like a pitmaster general, cigarette in one corner of her mouth, tongs in hand. A folding table now held trays of wings, ribs, corn salad, and someone's homemade moonshine disguised in a sweet tea jug. Miriam watched from her garden bench with a mason jar of lemonade and a satisfied stillness that came from knowing the chaos around her was not only sanctioned, but orchestrated. Across the lot, Kyle stood by the Prius like a mall cop trying to manage a riot with a notepad. Lena paced near the front gate, phone pressed to her ear, sunglasses off now, eyes wide and wild. Miriam didn't need to hear the words. She knew the rhythm of a meltdown. A few minutes later, the flashing lights cut through the trees. 2 squad cars crawling up the drive like they already didn't want to be here. Officers stepped out, both middle-aged, local, faces suntanned and unfazed. Miriam stood and walked toward them calmly, one hand tucked in her pocket, the other still holding her lemonade. Lena intercepted them first. "Thank God. Officers, please, there are bikers in our house. Our house. They're trespassing. They've been partying all weekend, and it's completely out of control." One officer gave a polite nod and turned toward Miriam. "Ma'am, are you the property owner?" Miriam handed him a manila envelope. No words, just slow, steady eye contact. He flipped through it. Deed, utility bills, the city's short-term rental permit in her name. The officer looked back at Lena. "This says Ms. Harlow owns both properties outright," Lena stammered. "Yes, but we've lived here for years. It's family property." "Family," Miriam repeated under her breath, almost like a curse. The second officer noticed Darla walking over with a plate. "Hot wings?" she offered. "Grill's clean. Nothing illegal here but the spice level." He laughed. "Took one." The first officer did too. "Well," he said, licking sauce from his fingers, "as long as everyone's obeying noise ordinances and staying respectful." "We are," Miriam said calmly, "and the security camera footage supports that." Kyle stepped forward now, voice lower and bitter. "This is harassment." Miriam turned her head slowly toward him. "Number this is hospitality. Loud hospitality. You remember how that works, right?" Behind them, Darla cranked the speaker. Johnny Cash rolled over the property like a slow-moving storm. One of the neighbors from 2 lots over appeared at the edge of the drive, holding a tray of brownies. "Smelled the grill," she said, shrugging. "Figured I'd stop by." Another neighbor came with lawn chairs. Then a man from up the street strolled over with a 6-pack. Within minutes, the edge of the party blurred into something that looked a lot like a block gathering, uninvited, unplanned, and unmistakably welcome. Kyle stood like a statue. Lena pulled him aside, whispering frantically in his ear. Their linen outfits were wrinkled now, out of place in the denim and leather crowd. Back on her side of the yard, Miriam noticed her phone buzz. Lawn service reminder. She opened the app and canceled it. Then she walked to the shed and turned off the irrigation timer. The weeds would grow. She didn't mind. Let the yard look a little wild. Let it reflect the truth of things for once. Clean lines were for people who still pretended they had control. Monday morning arrived with a hush. The rattlers were gone. Back on the road, respectful to the end, leaving the back house cleaner than they found it. A thank you note in Sharpie was taped to the fridge. "Best Airbnb we ever invaded. XO, rattlers." But the silence wasn't peace. It was the sharp, suspended kind that follows public embarrassment and knows more is coming. Miriam stood on her porch sipping black coffee, staring across the gravel path. The guest house looked like a shell. No signs of life, just shadows behind curtains and a flickering ring light left on overnight. She took a final sip, set her mug down, and walked to her garage. Inside, she pulled out an old wooden stake, a leftover campaign sign frame, and the sturdiest black Sharpie she owned. She worked quietly, efficiently. "For sale guest unit only inquire with owner, no tenants." She planted it dead center in the mulch in front of the back house. Not too flashy, just bold enough. Within 45 minutes, Lena was outside, phone in one hand, tears in the other. She hit Go Live on Instagram. "I don't even know how to say this," she began, voice trembling. "Some of you already saw the photo. My mother-in-law, who knows we live here, is now putting up a for sale sign on our part of the property. Like we're squatters. I'm trying not to cry. This is literal sabotage." She did cry. Right on camera. Soft, Instagrammable tears. The kind that pair well with dramatic acoustic music and an affiliate code for skincare. But this time the comments weren't kind. "Wait, isn't she the actual owner? Didn't you rent out her house?" "Girl, this ain't sabotage, this is self-defense." Lena ended the live stream fast. Miriam didn't watch it. She didn't have to. Someone screenshotted it and sent it to her anyway, with the caption, "Guess she forgot whose name is on the paperwork." By midday, Kyle called Reed. Reed didn't pick up. He texted instead, "Not my problem. She owns the dirt under your shoes. Go whine to someone who can't read deeds." Reed had always been surgical when it counted. That evening, as the sun melted over the pine tips, Darla rolled back into the driveway. Alone this time, but with a trunk full of folding chairs and a new security floodlight. "You want us to hang around a few more weekends?" she asked casually, unloading a bag of zip ties and motion sensors like it was a Tupperware party. Miriam raised an eyebrow. "You moonlight as security detail now?" Darla shrugged. "We moonlight as whatever the hell our friends need. Just say the word." Miriam looked out over the property. The backhouse light had flipped off. Kyle's car was gone. Lena's phone silence was the loudest thing she'd heard all day. "Let's keep it classy," Miriam said. "No more engines for now. Just presents." Darla nodded. "Classy with an edge. I can do that." Miriam smiled, but her eyes didn't soften. She walked back to her porch, pulled the sign a quarter-inch deeper into the mulch, and dusted off her hands. Let them wonder. Let the speculation grow like the weeds she'd let flourish, wild, creeping, and hard to control. The printer spat page after page into Miriam's outstretched hand. Each sheet was a receipt, evidence gathered like brush fire kindling, screenshots of Lena's reels, captions bragging about modern desert hosting, Airbnb payout summaries logged under Kyle's email alias, and influencer brand deals that used her home as backdrop for skincare, cookware, even a luggage sponsor. Miriam didn't flinch. She just fed the next batch through the scanner. By noon, the living room coffee table was a battlefield of paperwork, color-coded tabs, highlighter strokes, date stamps in the margins. She sat cross-legged on the rug, glasses perched low, sipping lukewarm tea and circling totals with a red pen. There were no outbursts, no rants, just math. Quiet, brutal math. A year's worth of side hustling from a house they didn't own, earning off a life they didn't build. One reel alone had generated over $2,700 in affiliate codes. Miriam underlined the figure twice, boxed it. She printed one last document, a cover letter. Short, clipped, deadly. To Airbnb Legal and Trust Department. Attached is a comprehensive summary of unauthorized activity involving my primary residence at address redacted. This includes falsified host identity, commercial usage without deed holder consent, and digital monetization through influencer branding. I have included screenshots, verified platform payments, and promotional footage using my likeness and property without legal approval. My attorney has been copied. We are pursuing back rent, damages, and formal delisting. Regards, Miriam E. Harlow. She slipped everything into a thick white envelope, sealed it with a precise press of her thumb, and added a second copy addressed to her homeowner's insurance. Then she opened a third, smaller envelope, this one labeled in her own handwriting, Backhouse, Final Designation. Inside, she inserted a signed update to her will. The guest unit would no longer pass to Kyle. It would go directly to a local housing nonprofit, one that focused on single mothers, aging tenants, and families displaced by predatory rentals. No legacy, no inheritance, just consequence. Somewhere across town, Lena's phone rang mid-lunch. She was sitting in a boutique cafe, trying to force-feed her face into relevance again. Matcha latte, a new collab necklace, barely there makeup for the authentic recovery look. But the call derailed everything. Brand rep. "Lena, I'm sorry, but..." The housing stories made things complicated. Lena blinked. "It's not true. We've seen the legal docs. The comment section's a minefield. We're dropping the upcoming posts and revoking the renewal." Click. The latte turned to acid in her throat. Kyle's blow came an hour later. He was mid-pitch with a potential investor over Zoom when the client paused, looking off-screen. "Wait, your wife isn't the one who listed her mom's house without asking, right?" Kyle's throat caught. "That's exaggerated. Your situation feels unstable," the client replied, dry. "We're going to pass." Call ended. Meeting vanished. Silence followed. That evening, Reed stopped by in boots and a windbreaker, holding a folder thick enough to bend. "It's done," he said, dropping it onto Miriam's kitchen table with a soft thump. "Filed, certified, legally bulletproof." She nodded once and slid the envelope toward her inbox. Reed looked around at the piles of documents still neatly stacked. "You're not angry," he observed. "No," Miriam said, gently tucking a printed reel of Lena's into a labeled binder. "I'm organized." He smiled, proud and a little afraid. "You want a drink?" she asked. "I want two," he replied. They shared a bourbon by the window, watching the light fade behind the trees. Nothing dramatic, no speeches, just stillness and ink drying on the truth. The envelope was heavy, not from weight, but consequence. Miriam laid it on the porch railing of the back house just before sunrise, the kind of quiet hour when dew clings to everything and the world hasn't decided what it's going to be yet. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. Inside was a 30-day notice, typed, signed, titled in bold, Revocation of Occupancy Privilege, Non-Tenant Family. Stapled to the back was an invoice, 6 months of unpaid leaseback at market rate, plus utilities, plus 2 estimates from local contractors for cleaning and rekeying. She tucked a small, yellow sticky note on top. Kyle, since you understand passive income so well, I thought I'd show you what it looks like in reverse. M. By the time Kyle opened the door and found it, Miriam was already back at her own kitchen counter, watering the succulents. 15 minutes later, he stormed across the gravel path, fists clenched, face blotchy. "You're ruining your own family," he shouted, holding the papers like they were burning his hands. Miriam didn't even turn around. "You rented mine," she said evenly. "I'm just settling accounts." Kyle stood there, panting. "Do you even hear yourself?" Miriam turned now, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "I hear myself just fine, and for the first time in months so do other people." Behind them, a truck rumbled up the drive. Darla hopped out in a bandana and overalls, trailed by 2 more rattlers, this time without bikes. They came not with beer, but gloves, spades, mulch, and a potted Meyer lemon tree. "Garden day," Darla said simply. "You ready?" Miriam nodded. "Raised beds first. Let's start with the back fence." Kyle blinked at them like they were speaking a different language. Darla gave him a sideways glance. "We're not the party," she said. "We're the roots." They started unloading quietly, tools clinking, dirt shifting, blossoms rustling. Lena peeked through the blinds, then disappeared again. 10 minutes later, she re-emerged, phone in hand. Ring light, tripod, a fresh knit cardigan and some sad lighting behind her. She went live. Again. "My mother-in-law is displacing us," she began, voice trembling. "She's changed the locks on our story, not just the house. I know you guys understand how cruel generational bitterness can be." But the view count sat still. Single digits. Comments trickled in, then stopped altogether. Someone wrote, "Girl, just log off." Another, "You did this to yourself." No one stayed. Lena ended the live and tossed the phone down onto the porch swing like it had betrayed her. Miriam watched the whole thing from behind the honeysuckle bush she was pruning, expression unreadable. By late afternoon, the raised beds were in. The back fence gleamed with fresh paint. Darla installed a new motion light over the gate, motion-triggered, solar-powered, discreet. "This'll keep the vibes tidy," she said. They all laughed. Before leaving, Darla handed Miriam a small wooden sign, carved by hand. "No trespassing, no exceptions. I figured you'd earned it," she said. Miriam smiled, not softly, but fully. Major twist number 2. By evening, a viral thread was circulating on Twitter. Woman evicts son plus influencer DIL after they stole her house for Airbnb content. Fights back with bikers, paperwork, and heirloom tomatoes. Attached was a photo, Miriam in overalls, holding a watering can, standing beside Darla beneath the new motion light. The caption? "Elder property rights queen. Let her host the next presidential debate." Thousands of retweets, blue checks, comment sections full of "protect your moms." "This is housing justice. I'd die for her." Miriam saw it all while sitting at her kitchen table, eating a tuna melt and drinking chamomile tea. The studio was tucked behind a plant shop, its entrance hidden by a curtain of ivy and a faded sandwich board that read, "Unseen Elders, recording in progress." Inside, it was cooler, calmer, the kind of quiet that asked you to take your time before speaking. Miriam sat on a velvet armchair in front of a single mic. Across from her, Jada Morgan, host of Unseen Elders, a podcast known for peeling back the polished veneers of aging and dignity in modern America. Jada had a kind face and a notebook worn soft at the corners. She smiled as she adjusted the mic arm toward Miriam. "You comfortable?" she asked. Miriam nodded. "As I'll ever be." The red light blinked on. Jada's voice turned deliberate, soothing. Today we're speaking with Miriam Harlow, a retired librarian from Flagstaff, Arizona, who, until recently, was known mostly to her neighbors and her heirloom tomatoes. But that changed after a viral thread revealed she'd reclaimed her home from, well, let's say, a misguided family situation. Miriam exhaled through her nose, amused. Jada continued, "You've been called everything from a landlord of vengeance to the patron saint of boundary setting. What actually happened?" Miriam didn't launch into a rant. She didn't speak in hashtags. She simply began. "I came home from a weekend away and found strangers in my living room. They'd been booked by my daughter-in-law on Airbnb, without my consent, using my name, my photos, my belongings." Jada nodded but didn't interrupt. Miriam's voice stayed level. "They called it a family business, but it wasn't business. It was theft, neatly filtered and sold as lifestyle content." The story unfolded without drama, only sharp precision. The listing, the influencer reels, the biker retaliation, the paperwork. Jada leaned in when Miriam got to the raised garden beds. "So, that was real?" she asked, almost disbelieving. "Oh yes," Miriam said. "They helped me move every terracotta pot I had, even left a jar of pickled okra in the fridge." They both laughed softly, but it wasn't just humor. It was relief. Jada let the silence settle, then said, "That video clip of you holding the watering can, it's everywhere, millions of views. The phrase elder dignity is trending." Miriam raised an eyebrow. "Funny, considering how undignified they made me feel when I was sleeping in my car." The room went still again. "Do you see yourself as a symbol?" Jada asked carefully. Miriam shook her head. I see myself as someone who remembered her name was still on the deed. A beat. That's all. I just stopped letting people forget it." The clip cut cleanly there, exactly 90 seconds long, and by the time the episode aired that evening, it had already been reposted across platforms with one title, "When Grandma Becomes the Landlord of Vengeance." The comments rolled in by the thousands. "This is how you handle entitlement." She didn't raise her voice. She raised her boundaries. "This woman is a lighthouse. I want her embroidered on a tea towel." Screenshots of the episode hit Reddit. Merch mock-ups followed. Someone even made a playlist called Miriam's Raised Bed Energy, all soft folk music and revenge ballads. But Miriam didn't post about it. She was back home, folding laundry, pairing socks, sipping peppermint tea when the buzz came in. A direct message request. Not from Lena, not from Kyle, from the City Library Board. Would she be interested in speaking at their Civic Resilience panel next month? The theme was, "Home is worth defending." She stared at the message, then smiled. The moving van arrived in the late morning, just as the mountain air began to warm and the scent of last night's rain lifted from the gravel drive. There was no ceremony, no farewell brunch, and no curated Instagram farewell. The only sounds were the crunch of tires on the stones and the hollow slam of aluminum ramps unfolding against the drive. Kyle stood on the porch of the back house, arms crossed and eyes lowered. He wore the same faded hoodie he used to mow the lawn in when they first moved in, the one he swore he'd replace when life stabilized. Lena trailed behind him, rolling a medium-sized suitcase and carrying her wide-brimmed felt hat under one arm, the one she used to angle just right in her hosting reels. They did not speak. They did not look across the yard. Miriam watched from behind the screen door of her front porch, a mug of black tea cooling in her hands, steam barely curling into the open air. She didn't hide, and she didn't gloat. Her presence was not theatrical, it was just consistent. She had outlasted them, and the van simply marked what had already been decided. 2 hired movers worked quickly, methodically dismantling the curated aesthetic of a life that had never quite belonged. The ring light, still smudged with fingerprint oil, a stack of monogrammed throw pillows, plastic plants, a rolling garment rack lined with white linen and prairie core silhouettes, still tagged. It all went into the back of the truck, packed tight in a formation that looked professional but carried the dull weight of a life hurriedly undone. The movers barely made eye contact with their clients and even less with Miriam. They were there for logistics, not reconciliation. Lena's face was partially hidden behind oversized sunglasses, but Miriam could tell from her posture, shoulders too straight, chin too high, that she was holding back tears. Whether they were for show, pride, or genuine shame was unclear, but Miriam no longer found herself invested in deciphering them. The final item loaded was a faux antique welcome sign that once hung in the kitchen. Miriam had always hated it. The font was too whimsical. It said, "Gather here," as if hospitality was a birthright and not a responsibility. By 12:43 p.m., the van's back door had been locked and sealed. They left without a word. No confrontation, no apology, no goodbye. 2 days later, Miriam walked across the property line with her key in hand, the same copy she had insisted on keeping even when Kyle had rolled his eyes and muttered something about trust. The lock turned easily. The house greeted her with silence. The air inside was flat, with the faint chemical tang of eucalyptus oil and old dust. Sunlight streamed through the windows onto spotless hardwood, but the place felt hollow, like a hotel room after checkout. On the counter sat a mason jar labeled tips, still half filled with change and a few wrinkled dollar bills. Miriam picked it up, turned it in her hand, then set it back down without a word. She walked room by room, opening windows, pulling back curtains. The space exhaled. The fake succulents had been removed, and the walls were bare. But her husband's original carpentry, the window frame he once planned by hand, the corner shelf he'd anchored too well to be removed, remained untouched. That afternoon, Darla arrived with 2 gallons of sunflower yellow paint, a folding stepladder, and a 6-pack of seltzer she insisted was for hydration. The 2 women worked in easy silence. The brushstrokes were wide and patient, the kind of work that invites thought rather than fills it. As the color spread across the walls, the space warmed again, shedding its sterile neutrality for something that felt lived in, even before anyone lived there. "I reckon they won't like this color," Darla said, standing back to admire their work. Miriam looked at the yellow, then nodded once. "That's the point." The lease was finalized by the end of the week. The nonprofit had already pre-approved the tenant, Eliza, a single mother with a steady job, modest savings, and no social media presence beyond a long-dormant Facebook page full of birthday party photos and a few job updates. She arrived on a Sunday with her 7-year-old son and a canvas tote of books labeled Kitchen Toys Misc. Miriam greeted them not as a landlord, not even as a host, but as someone who understood what rebuilding felt like. She handed Eliza a glass casserole dish covered in foil, broccoli cheddar still hot, and offered the boy a wooden garden sign to hang near the back fence. They did not take a selfie. They didn't post a thing. As Miriam handed over the house key, clean, brass, newly cut, Eliza's eyes welled just slightly, then steadied. "No one's ever trusted me with something this permanent," she said. Miriam pressed the key into her palm and replied, "Well, that changes today." The email came 3 weeks after they left. The subject line was short, no punctuation, just 2 words. "Miss you, Miriam," almost deleted it without opening. She recognized the sender address, Kyle's old personal Gmail, the one she'd once helped him recover a password for when he lost access in college. That was before Lena, before the branding, before the filtered kitchen tours and the hospitality hashtags. The body of the email was only 2 lines. "We miss you. Just wanted to say that. Not trying to start anything. Hope you're okay." No capitalization, no acknowledgement of what had passed between them. Just a thin little gesture wrapped in nostalgia and avoidance, hoping it might somehow undo something without actually saying it out loud. Miriam stared at it for a long time. She did not respond right away. Instead, she stood, walked to the back house, and stepped inside. Eliza and her son were out for the afternoon, so the place was quiet, warm, sunlit, soft. The lemon-colored walls reflected the daylight in a way that softened everything they touched. A pot of soup was still simmering in the crock-pot. A calendar on the fridge had hand-drawn stars on the day labeled field trip. The home no longer held echoes of betrayal. It carried new breath. She returned to her own kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat down at her computer. Her reply was methodical, deliberate. "Kyle, you didn't miss me. You missed access." Attached is a summary of every breach from the last 18 months, time-stamped, documented, and archived. I thought it might help clarify how we arrived here. It's not personal, it's record-keeping. Hope you're well, M. She attached a PDF file titled breachlogfinal.pdf and hit send. The document was 11 pages long. It included everything: unauthorized Airbnb bookings, social media monetization reports, flagged insurance exposures, messages between Lena and guests logged through the guesthouse Wi-Fi, screenshots of her belongings used in branded content. Nothing accusatory, just the truth. Numbered, cited, dated. Kyle replied within an hour. "You're making this personal. I never thought you'd go this far. We're family." Miriam closed the browser and stepped away from the desk. She didn't need to respond right away. She'd already said what needed to be said. But after folding a load of laundry and watering the mint outside her kitchen window, she returned and typed one final sentence: "You're confusing kindness with permission." She hit send without adding a sign-off. 2 days later, Miriam received a call from the director of the housing nonprofit. Eliza's unit, they said, had been featured in a write-up in the local paper. Just a quiet profile, nothing flashy, about single mothers finding stability in repurposed spaces. "We were wondering," the director said, "if we could formally name the guest house in your honor. Nothing grand, just a plaque outside the door, maybe something on the garden fence." Miriam hesitated, but only for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Would you like us to call it the Harlow unit?" the woman asked. "Or just Miriam's house?" Miriam looked out the window at the back house. The flower beds were blooming now, messy and unruly and alive. She thought of all the boundaries she had redrawn, not out of vengeance but to reclaim space, to make room for something better. "No," she said, "call it Boundary House." There was a pause on the line, then a soft laugh. "That's perfect." That evening, Miriam stood at the edge of the gravel path where the two houses met. She held a thin wooden stake in one hand and a brass plaque in the other. The plaque was simple: white lettering, clean serif font, no embellishments. Boundary House. Established 2025. Flagstaff, Arizona. A place for starting again. Darla helped hammer the post into the soil. Eliza's son watched from the porch, legs swinging off the step, a book in his lap. When the plaque was steady, Miriam took a single step back, brushing the dirt from her palms. The envelope was small. No return address, just her name written in careful cursive, the kind that tries to look confident even when the hand behind it isn't sure. Miriam found it nestled between a water bill and a coupon packet on a Wednesday morning. She nearly tossed it. But something made her pause. She carried it to the kitchen, slid a butter knife under the seal, and pulled out a note card. Plain, heavyweight, no decoration, just graphite and truth. "Dear Miriam, you probably don't remember me, but I'm the guy who stayed in your house the weekend everything came apart. Cam, the guy with the coffee and the TikTok. I wanted to say thank you. You inspired my senior thesis. I wrote about generational housing theft and boundary reclamation. But more than that, you inspired my mother. She left a relationship where she was always too emotional, too controlling, and started over. Because she watched you stand your ground. That video of you by the garden? It's framed above her desk. We still talk about you, just thought you should know." Cam Miriam sat down at the table, card still in her hands. The morning light fell soft across her lap, and her tea had long gone cold. She didn't cry loudly. There was no dramatic gasp, no collapsed shoulders, just a quiet unraveling behind the eyes. She folded the card, twice, then once more, and tucked it into the drawer where she kept the letters that mattered, the ones that carried weight, not polish. That afternoon, Reed arrived with the final paperwork from the nonprofit. He looked more relaxed now, fewer creases in the brow, more patience in the shoulders. He dropped a thick folder onto her kitchen counter, spine cracked just once, pages already tabbed. "Everything's here," he said, handing her a pen. "It's yours. You can walk away, or you can make it permanent." Miriam picked up the pen. No hesitation. She signed across the bottom line of the contract, a 10-year housing commitment. Guaranteed nonprofit use of the back house for transitional families, vetted annually. Rent stabilized, upkeep shared, and community involvement optional, but welcome. "I've had offers," she said, handing the pen back. "I know," Reed replied. "High offers, investors, flippers, some influencer couple in Sedona who said they'd honor the story." Reed made a face. "Let them buy a hashtag." She smiled. "Exactly." He returned the signed contract to his briefcase, clicked the latch, and handed her a small fireproof pouch. "Deed copy, tax adjustments, new insurance rider, store it somewhere safe." "I will," she said. "Back closet, where the good flashlights live." She walked him to the porch, and they stood for a moment in the warm hush of late afternoon. No words. Just two people who understood that legacy didn't come from what you passed down, but from what you protected. That evening, she received a comment notification on an old gardening photo, one of the few she still kept public. The caption was about soil alkalinity. The comment read, "Must be nice to hold grudges for a living." It was Lena. No profile picture anymore, no link in bio, just a lowercase handle and old bitterness trying to dress itself as cleverness. Miriam didn't flinch. She didn't screenshot. She didn't text Reed. She replied directly, one sentence, no punctuation, no grudge, just ownership. The message hung there, weightless and undeniable, a declaration, not a defense. By the time she closed the app, the comment had been liked by over 2,000 people. A few had even replied beneath her, one simply writing, "Etched in stone." The video dropped at 7 p.m. sharp on a Friday. No countdown, no teaser campaign, just a quiet post on the homepage of a modest YouTube channel called Flagstaff Stories, which normally covered things like historic bike trails and haunted diner folklore. But this one was different. Title: The Lock Code They Shouldn't Have Changed. Runtime: 12 minutes and 6 seconds. Thumbnail: a golden hour shot of a gravel path leading to a modest yellow-painted guest house, framed by pine trees and softened by dust. Within minutes, the comment section lit up like an old switchboard. She didn't even raise her voice, just the rent. "My mom would love her. My grandma is her. Some folks fight with fists." She used boundaries and bloom boxes. The documentary opened with drone footage, soft aerial sweeps over Miriam's property, where the sun hit the clapboard siding like a sigh. The soundtrack was nothing flashy. No strings, just ambient wind and the distant hum of a wind chime near the porch. Cut to Darla, in her bandana and overalls, laughing as she hauled a planter box into place. Her voice, off camera, said simply, "You don't mess with Miriam. She's steel in a chamomile mug." Then came a soft dissolve to Miriam herself, seated in the garden, hands in soil, planting rosemary. Her hat shaded her eyes, but not her expression. She was calm, resolved, centered. "I didn't go looking for a fight," she said, "but they changed the lock code. And when someone changes the code on something you built, you don't ask for permission to get back in. You reclaim it." There were no clips of Lena, no photos of Kyle, no names at all. Just the phrase, delivered by the narrator like an old proverb. Some stories begin when people forget whose name is on the deed. The video traced the rise and fallout of the incident in measured beats, snippets of the rattlers unloading mulch, slow zooms on the Boundary House plaque, a few still images from Cam's original viral post. But it was never sensational. No drama edits, no clickbait music. This was about resilience, and people responded. By the time the sun dipped behind the San Francisco peaks, the video had crossed 40,000 views. Within the hour, 200,000. It spread fast, not just because of the drama, but because of the tone, the dignity, the quiet way Miriam had refused to be erased, not with rage, but with paperwork, patience, and a casserole dish wrapped in foil. Her inbox began to fill again. But this time it wasn't brand deals or trolls or media vultures. It was messages from daughters who'd taken in their mothers, sons apologizing to women they'd overlooked, retired teachers offering to volunteer at Boundary House, even one woman from Ohio who wrote, "I just changed my own lock code. Thank you." Late that night, her phone buzzed again, this time with a name she recognized but didn't expect. April McKenna, Flagstaff's long-running local news anchor, a voice known from decades of winter closures, city election nights, and 4th of July coverage. Her tone in the message was brief but warm. "Hi Miriam, we just saw the doc. I'm co-hosting the city's keynote series this fall on dignity, land use, and local justice. Would you consider being our headliner?" No pressure, but the whole room's hoping you'll say yes. Miriam stared at the screen for a long moment. The house around her was silent. The back house windows glowed dimly across the gravel. Eliza's sun had stuck glow-in-the-dark stars to the glass, and they pulsed faintly like fireflies caught in a jar. She walked to her pantry, pulled down a tin of chamomile, and put water on the stove. She didn't respond to the message yet. Instead, she stepped out onto the porch, blanket around her shoulders, tea mug in hand, and sat in the quiet that now belonged fully to her. She looked out at the land, not for memory, not for grief, but for certainty. It had taken nearly a year, but she had turned trespass into testimony. Not for revenge, not even for redemption, for record, for echo, and maybe for the stage. It was just past 8 a.m. when Miriam stepped into the cool morning light, a small lockbox cradled in her, arms like something living. The metal was clean and unbranded, matte gray, simple hinge, key code dial on the front. She had installed it herself, even tested the code twice to be sure it worked. The numbers had meaning, though no one would guess them easily. The year her name first went on the deed, and the day she'd finally decided that ownership meant more than paperwork. She attached the box to the outer post near the back house, just to the right of the new motion light. It clicked into place with a sound that was quiet but final. Inside, she had placed 3 things. The first, a freshly cut house key. Brass, smooth-edged, marked with a tiny red dot she'd painted near the top. Nothing visible from a distance, but enough to know this was the last one made. The second, a notarized trust document tucked into a blue envelope, sealed with wax. It stated that Boundary House would, from this year forward, remain protected under community lease. No buyouts, no inheritance loopholes, no transfers of convenience, only use, only purpose. And the third, a letter. It was handwritten, signed only Miriam, and read, "If you've found this, it means you were given permission or earned it. What's in here is not for sale. It is not content. It's shelter. It's stillness. It's meant for those who remember how to ask. Welcome, whoever you are." She closed the box, spun the dial, and stepped back. There was no audience, only the chirp of a distant sparrow and the rustle of a tomato vine brushing the side of the garden fence. Later that afternoon, Miriam hosted tea in the front yard. Nothing formal, just 2 ceramic mugs and a plate of lemon cookies dusted with powdered sugar. Eliza joined her in a soft flannel shirt, her son playing nearby with a thrifted toy truck, wheels humming over the flagstone path. They spoke easily, not about the past, not even about the house, but about herbs, about what to plant next, about how the calendula had taken better to the shade than either of them expected. It was enough. Around 4 o'clock, Darla rolled up in her truck with a cardboard box labeled "Rattled Produce, Crop Share Number 3. "I brought tomatoes," she announced, hoisting the box with a grin. "And basil, and gossip if you've got time." Miriam laughed, real, full-throated. "Only if it pairs well with mint tea." They sat for a while, legs crossed, shoes kicked off at the edge of the porch, the air heavy with the scent of warm earth and something sweet from the neighbors' lilacs. The sun began its long descent behind the trees, washing the yard in soft copper light. Miriam didn't say much. She just sat, mug in hand, letting the quiet bloom around her. Her eyes wandered, past the painted garden beds, past the motion light glowing faintly under the eaves, past the lockbox hidden in plain sight. There was no movement from the back house, just peace, earned, intentional. The grass was growing in patches again, less manicured but more alive. A bluebird landed on the edge of the water basin and fluttered once before dipping its beak. Nothing curated, nothing filtered. Just a yard, just a home. Darla rose first, brushing crumbs from her lap. "Well," she said, lifting the empty cookie plate, "guess I better go before you charge me rent." Miriam smiled. Only if you start posting reels. As the truck rumbled down the gravel and the boy gathered his toys for dinner, Miriam remained on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her tea still warm. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the scent of tomatoes, chamomile, and distant pine. She looked out at the yard, hers now in full, not leased, not borrowed, not branded, just held. She took one last sip, exhaled through her nose, and said aloud to no one in particular, a final verdict, calm and firm. They rented my home for profit. I reclaimed it for peace.